In the year 1846, when winter clung like a second skin to the forests of Bavaria, a small village lay cupped between hills and pines and the pale thread of a river. Weir, a place whose name is more easily lost to the tongue than remembered by it. Carts creaked down its single street. Smoke climbed in thin columns from chimneys and was pulled apart by the wind. The sound of bells stitched mornings to evenings. Nothing in Weir begged to be noticed. Nothing, until the physician arrived and took the sick into his house and, in the hush of a season that seems not yet to have ended, vanished with them. The first mention is a thin line in a parish ledger, written by a priest who pressed too hard with his quill. The physician, Herr Brandt, is no longer with us. Nor are those who were left in his care. The house is silent. The ink spreads like a bruise on the paper. There are no names beneath the line. No blessings. Absence entered into record. Germany then was not a country but a patchwork. Bavaria with its hills and frost, Prussia with its iron-boned cities, small states threaded with old rules, older fears. Men spoke confidently of progress but covered their children with rosemary on storm nights. The microscope had begun to offer its secrets, yet the breath of the sick was still called miasma, and the grave was still said to exhale. Doctors bled their patients to lighten the pressure of invisible humors and gave mercury to shine the insides clean. And because so much of healing was guesswork, a physician, especially in a poor village, could seem priest and scavenger and sorcerer in a single coat. Friedrich Brandt came to Weir in the autumn of 1845, walking beside a cart with a small trunk and a long case of instruments. He was tall but spare, his cheeks hollowed not by hunger but by the habit of thought that thins a face. His hair was close-cropped, already touched by grey. He did not smile often, and when he did, his eyes did not follow his mouth. Those eyes were pale and precise. People felt weighed by them, as if he were confirming a detail he had suspected before he ever met them. He took the merchant's house on the square and converted it at once. 2 rooms for beds, a third for notes and books, a cellar for storage, a stove that kept the place narrowly within the territory of warmth. Brandt's skill was evident from the first week. He set a miller's broken arm with a steadiness that made the man's wife cry in relief. He breathed into the mouth of a newborn who would not take the world and startled the child into life. He washed his blades in boiled water, then in spirits, and let them dry against clean cloth. This alone marked him as strange to other doctors, who were used to wiping steel on their coats and moving on. He wrote constantly. He asked questions no one expected, about dreams and phrases remembered upon waking, about what the sick had smelled in their fevers, about the weight of rooms at night. No one knew why he had left the city. Someone at the inn said Brandt had argued with superior men and been asked to depart. Someone else said the city had become too loud with dying. In those days, all reasons ended with the same shrug. Men go where they can still work without breaking. Weir did not ask. Weir needed. The winter came early. The river narrowed to a slow seam of black water. Snow made the roofs beautiful and the roads impossible. Coughs traveled from table to table as quickly as gossip. A girl named Anna Weber stopped playing and began to sit very still with her lips parted, as if listening for someone to tell her what to do with the next breath. A farmer, Johann Keller, who used to carry a full barrel on his shoulder, found his hands shaking when he lifted a cup. The widow Hoffmann, whose house edged the forest, woke from cold sleep and fainted so cleanly it looked like obedience. Mothers brought children, husbands brought wives. The old were brought by anyone with a back broad enough for it, and Brandt opened his door. He took them into the clinic and asked the families to return home. He spoke gently and used the language of contagion, and because fear of contagion is older than language itself, the people obeyed. He burned herbs in a small dish and held a cloth to each mouth. He pressed a hand to each forehead and closed his eyes not in prayer but as if aligning a clock within himself to their fever. He wrote each name. He wrote again when fever climbed or fell or changed its shape. He wrote what patients said in the thin moments when fever let go and clarity, like a thief, showed itself briefly. I heard a hum. The walls are listening. The air is thick. The doctor is kind. There is someone else in the room but I cannot see them. From the square, the clinic looked ordinary. Shutters, a door, smoke from a pipe. But people began to avoid its threshold. It is not always sight that warns us. Sometimes it is the way sound fails near a thing. Sometimes it is how a corner of the eye refuses to finish an image. Greta Lang, the innkeeper's wife, said she walked by and felt her stomach lean away from her body. She said the window seemed darker on the inside than the night around it. Lucas Bauer, a stable hand who stayed up too late, said he heard laughter one night. Child laughter, the kind that lifts, and then it turned. He could not explain what turned meant, only that the next second his feet were moving him away in a direction he had not chosen. Father Matthias Kruger measured the village with scripture the way a man measures rooms with a candle. He was not unkind. He believed the world had edges and that a priest's work was to keep a hand on them. He visited Brandt. He asked to see the sick. Brandt declined with courtesy and logic. The priest smelled the faint burn of alcohol and the iron edge of blood and something beneath these that was sweet enough to sting the nose. He said that families had a right to see their own. Brandt said there was a time for seeing, and that this was not it. The priest left with a small cold beneath his breastbone. Days passed and no one came out of the clinic. Brandt gave brief reports. Rest is necessary. They sleep. Their fevers careen, but I am following. He did not invite anyone to enter. The snow renewed itself in thin layers that made every footprint new. The square's lamplight showed little because it did not fall far. People waited. Waiting is what a village does when it has already done everything else. The first to return, if return is the word, was Keller. He was found not on the clinic steps but in a ditch where snow had been tamped down by wind. His face was shined clean of blood, his lips dark as if he had put them to iron. There were no marks on him except the marks of how hard a man can hold himself when he must. Someone said he looked surprised. Someone else said he looked like a man who had heard the answer to a question he should not have asked. The physician was not asked how Keller left the clinic or why he lay where he did. Questions sometimes choose not to be asked when the asker wants to go on sleeping at night. After Keller, the village changed its breathing. Doors stayed shut longer. Words were kept low. Children were kept nearer the hearth, though the children themselves began to dream of cold corridors that did not end. One girl told her mother she had been following the doctor down a hallway with many doors. Behind each door, someone called her by name. The mother let the girl finish and then told her not to say such things. She did not ask if her daughter had opened any of the doors. The storm that split the church bell came like a hand closing over the village. Lightning went so wide across the hill that for a second the trees looked like a row of ribs. The bell's mouth opened and never shut again. That same night, men said the windows of the clinic held a red like blood held to light. Women said they heard a multitude speaking in the house, not loud enough to make out any one word. The way a river is made of sentences you cannot separate. The priest wrote briefly, "The house hums. The people look to me and I do not know which way to point them." At last, they gathered with torches and tools, because a point comes when fear prefers motion to endurance. They opened the door and stepped into rooms that looked almost relieved to be seen. Beds were stripped. The hearth was ash and not warm. The instruments sat arranged with an attention that felt like apology. There was a sweetness in the air that had nothing to do with food. Someone whispered Anna Weber's name and the whisper fell straight down and did not travel at all. The cellar waited. Stairs, then stone. There was the smell of things that have been kept from the air too long. The walls were damp. The damp was not random but gathered, as if pulled by a pattern. Father Kruger shook holy water from his fingers and the drops hissed as if he had put them on hot iron. Men let their torches move closer to the walls and saw that the damp had edges and a slow pulse to it, as if something living were just behind the stone and breathing without panic. A hum began. It was what the river had sounded like in the girl's dream, only nearer, only in the bones. Shapes showed themselves in the damp. Not faces, the men swore later, but it would be difficult to choose another word. Mouths that did not open to breathe but to form some syllable the room could not carry. Eyes that did not look at the men but past them, as if continuing to watch whatever was on the other side. A blacksmith cried out. The sound rang off the stone and landed back in the throat of the room, and threw his weight forward the way a body throws itself toward the person it has lived beside for 20 years. His hand entered the wall the way a hand enters water. The wall closed as water does when the hand is removed. The wall did not return the hand. Then the doctor was there. Not arriving. There, as if the room had always contained him and only now decided to show it. His spectacles were gone. His hair looked burned in places. His mouth looked like a man's mouth. His eyes looked like a room with no furniture. He lifted his hands and the hum altered, as if to make listening easier. "They are not gone," he said, and the words were plain. "They are becoming. I have opened the way. You cannot close it now." It was not a threat. It was a statement like weather. He stepped backward and let the wall take him the way a curtain takes a figure when it walks behind it. The clinic shuddered. A low crack moved across the ceiling as if a line had been ruled there by a giant hand. Stone dust took the air. Someone pushed the priest toward the stairs, and the priest pushed someone else, and the pushing moved quickly through them like sense restored. Outside, the night felt thin, as if much of it had been used up already. The building collapsed inward upon the place where the cellar had been, and the noise was like a cough that empties the chest entirely. When the dust settled, there was a blackness that looked less like shadow than like the absence of anything that could catch light at all. In the morning the square was changed the way a face is changed after weeping with no sound. People pretended to begin, because beginning is the cheapest way to look away. Some left Weir before the thaw. Some stayed and learned the new ways of silence. The priest wrote one line in his book because more would have been a lie: "We saw what should not be seen." He did not add prayer to the sentence. He had spent himself elsewhere. Investigators came with logic and care and the habit of men who have read many books without learning to be afraid. They found rooms that were tidy and a cellar that was rock and pressure and not a cellar anymore. They found no bodies. They found stains that could be water and a smell that could be sickness and also could not. They wrote. Their writing was neat. One said epidemic, one said flight, one said hysteria. None said that when they returned to their lodgings at night the beds seemed too soft, as if something were waiting under them that would be disappointed not to be included. A naturalist touched the stone and said it was damp from the ground. He looked closer and saw impressions in it like the memory of hands. He made notes that he showed to no one, about sound that did not travel through air but through bone. A lecturer in a city blamed peasants. Blaming peasants was fashionable. It made audiences feel clean. The lecturer slept badly that night for reasons he chose not to connect with his subject. Brandt's journals were not in the clinic. Years later, a book surfaced in a market, a leather thing with careful hand and sentences that did not breathe between commas. It spoke of listening through blood for what it remembered before it was blood. It spoke of doors, and instructed the reader that a door is a promise disguised as a line. It spoke of experiment with the tension between silence and the living will, of how death might be a pressure rather than an end. Scholars called it forgery because the alternative was to bring it home. The ruins grassed over. Children were told not to play there, and because children hear the truth behind most instructions, they played at the edges and then went away and did not tell what they felt. Travelers said their horses did not like the square. The horses put weight on their back legs and refused. In the records that should have been clean, pages began going missing as if a moth had trained itself to eat only this story. A clerk tied the folders with red ribbon and checked them every month and wrote angrily that still pages went missing. He retired with a sense that something had mocked him gently for many years. People moved. The forest reclaimed. Houses leaned and then knelt. The map kept the name and then the name itself began to sound like something else. A historian came and asked questions. A man old enough to care less about how he looked when he spoke said, "We buried the stones. Not the thing beneath them." The historian wrote the sentence and then did not return to his work. His writing bent toward other subjects. He had formed the habit of not standing near walls after dark. Time does what it does. Adds years to the truth until the truth looks like legend whether it is or not. Yet the ground still held its slow music. On certain nights the hum rose from beneath the square with the precision of a clock that had never needed winding. Those who lived near it carried the sound in their bodies the way sailors carry the sea when they finally return to land. A traveler in a modern year took photographs of the place and did not sleep for 3 nights. He deleted them not because they were poor but because they watched him when he looked away. What became of the doctor? If there is an answer, it does not sit still long enough for language. Perhaps he failed and was taken like any body into the greater body beneath things. Perhaps he succeeded and stepped through to where his patience had gone and found the air manageable there and the hum no longer a hum but a voice he could give a name. Perhaps he mistook the door for a threshold he could govern and discovered that all doors eventually belong to whatever they open upon. The village ended without ending. People live not far from where it lived and they buy bread and pay for petrol and look at their phones and every life is modern until it stands on certain pieces of earth and becomes older than itself. On that ground, sound is slow and weight has memory. On that ground, a man may feel watched not by eyes but by attention, the attention of something with no need to blink. If you go, and why would you will find no clinic and no cellar door and no instruments to catch the light. You will find grass and a shape and a quiet that is not quiet but expectation. You may stand there and hear nothing and you may feel nothing and you may congratulate yourself for being the kind of creature that believes only what is loud. Or you may find, as the light fails and the shapes of the trees build their black houses against the sky, that your own heart begins to beat out of time with itself, and between those beats there is room for another rhythm to move. Listen. The story is almost finished and a story hates to end alone. There is the river, smaller now than it was, and the wind that learned the turns of the square when there were carts, and the grass that knows where it is allowed to grow and where it hesitates. There is the bell with its mouth forever open. There is the part of you that enjoys being afraid when someone else is speaking and dislikes being afraid when the speaker has gone quiet. There is the place beneath the place. And sometimes, not always, a sound rises through the soil. A joined thing, too many to be one, too one to be many. You may say it is water. You may say it is your own blood, which is water with instructions. You may name it memory, which is the blood of a village. You may say that men like Brant build doors whether anyone asks them to or not, and that someone must later stand beside the place where the door was and hold the memory like a lantern. All of this will be reasonable. And then the sound will rise a little further and you will know that the reasonable thing is not always the true thing. It will not harm you to take a step back. It will not harm you to lift your hand and rest it lightly against the air where a wall used to be. If you feel the slightest current there, if the hair on your wrist pays attention, leave. Leave as if you remembered a promise. Walk until the ground beneath your feet sounds like ground again. Carry the silence with you, which is different from bringing it along. Do not tell yourself that it is over. Nothing is over. There is only the moment when a story climbs down from a man's shoulder and walks beside him, and the man pretends the road is empty. The villagers of Weir have no graves to visit for those who were taken. They have the square, which is worse. They left candles there for a time and then they stopped because the candles burned until they did something that made the people blow them out quickly. There were no parades of grief. There was work, and then other work. And yet the names move still under the tongue of the earth. Anna, Johann, Katerina, the brothers with their coughing blood, the mother with her infant, the apprentice with the shaking hands. A list is a prayer for those who have no priest. If anyone asks for instruction, there is none. If anyone asks for comfort, there is this. Horror is not the opposite of mercy. Sometimes horror is the shape mercy must take when someone has asked for a door where there was none and the universe, in its terrible kindness, has allowed the wish to touch the world. The rest is our task, to stand near certain places with care, to name our dead even when we cannot find them, to distrust the sweetness in a room that has no flowers, to prefer a silence that belongs to us over a silence that is merely waiting its turn to speak. When the wind comes low across the square it carries a tone that seems ordinary from a distance and different nearby. Stand far off and it is weather. Stand close and it is saying what it has been saying since the stone first grew damp from the inside. The voices of the vanished are not words. They are pressure. They are patience. They are the shape of breath on the other side of a door. If you listen until your listening is a kind of prayer, you may hear one more sound inside the crowd of it. The deliberate footfall of a man with hollow cheeks and careful hands. He is not cruel. He is not kind. He is a line drawn where none was before. He is a key without a hand to hold it. He is the mistake and the intention walking the same way. He does not look back. Why would he? He is, as all of us are in the instant we step forward, already becoming what we will never be able to explain. And then the hum settles, and the night grows its regular edges, and the square is once more only grass in a hollow. You go home by whatever name home has this year. You do not speak of the place for a while. You find a use for your hands. You stand sometimes in a doorway and feel how a line can hold you when nothing else will. You keep your voice low when there is no reason to. You sleep and dream of walls that breathe, and in the morning you tell no one, and the day is possible anyway. This is the story of Weir. Not a lesson. Not an answer. A pressure shaped into words and then released back into the dark where it belongs. If you remember it, remember only that once, in a winter that has not quite finished, a doctor opened a way and a village learned what a way can cost. The rest, the details, the dates, the comfort, has already been eaten by the thing that eats such things. Do not go looking for it. Or do. Either choice is a door. And if, one night, far from any forest, you wake because the wall beside your bed has become interesting to you in a way it has never been, do not put your ear to it. That is what he did. That is how doors begin.